rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M4 southbound near Doncaster, drivers face a 90-minute delay. A broken down vehicle closes the M6 southbound near Warrington, normalising tonight. A load spillage on the A5 northbound in Shropshire closes one lane. Congestion continues on the A43 northbound in Northamptonshire. On the M1 northbound near Luton, expect a 2-hour delay. Broken down vehicles delay the M27 near Hampshire and M5 exit slip in Somerset, resolving by evening. And on the trains, disruptions affect East Midlands and Great Western Railway. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
It's the final week to see how you could win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, good to be back. Channel crossings become the #1 issue in British politics. We will tonight have a mature, grown-up debate about the merits or otherwise of leaving the ECHR. I think you all know my view. And now record numbers, 6.5 million people on jobless benefits. Surely we simply can't afford to go on living like this. And are we, as was suggested yesterday in the Sunday Telegraph, are we into a downward fiscal doom loop that could lead to another 1976-style bailout? Economist Liam Halligan joins me for that. But to begin, let's get the news with Cameron Walker.
Nigel, thank you. At 7 o'clock, I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. 64 people have been formally charged under the Terrorism Act for allegedly showing support for the proscribed group Palestine Action. All those charged were initially arrested in central London on 2 separate Saturdays last month. If found guilty, they could face up to 6 months in prison. They are expected in court in October. And the leader of Reform UK has unveiled his plans to deport all small boat migrants, warning migration now poses a genuine threat to public order.
Today we launch Operation Restoring Justice. And as far as the people of this country is concerned, frankly, these measures can't come soon enough.
He says only mass deportations and a ban on asylum claims for illegal arrivals will restore trust. Speaking earlier, the Reform leader accused successive governments of failing the public and said outdated treaties must be scrapped. However, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has accused Reform of reheating and recycling Tory plans on immigration.
Nigel Farage is copying our homework. We put out a deportation bill in May. The stuff that actually works and what he said has come from there. But the truth is, he is not doing the thinking, we are. And just like we've seen with the Labour governments who didn't do their thinking in opposition, there'll be a disaster in government and in particular a disaster on the economy.
The Reform leader also pledged to pull Britain out of key international agreements, including the European Convention on Human Rights. Earlier, the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, told us that the Labour government would welcome discussions about changing how the ECHR operates, but would not.
We don't think it's in our national interest to withdraw completely, put ourselves in the same camp as two other countries, Russia and Belarus. But that is not to say that we don't think the Convention needs reform. We're making the case for reform in Europe. The Justice Secretary was at the Council of Europe in June doing just that. And we are looking about how the Convention is implemented domestically.
Poundland has avoided entering administration after a restructuring plan was approved by a judge at the High Court days before the company was due to run out of money. Barristers for the retailer had told a hearing earlier today that it would be placed into administration by Friday and was set to run out of money by the 7th of September if the plan was not approved. The scheme will see up to £60 million of new funding injected to keep the retailer afloat, among some other terms. And he knelt to the ground, pulled out a ring and said, "Marry me, Taylor Swift." In the last hour, the pop superstar has announced her engagement to the NFL player Travis Kelce. The 35-year-old made the announcement in a joint Instagram post with the Kansas City Chiefs player, which showed pictures of him proposing in a garden. The couple have been dating since 2023. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Back to Nigel in Westminster.
Good evening. Well, for now, it is the biggest single story. It's dominating national debate as another 900 people cross the English Channel over the course of the bank holiday. And we learned that 8% more than a year ago are living in migrant hotels. We learned that asylum applications are up to 111,000 last year, which is extraordinary because that means only 40% of the number have actually crossed the English Channel. The biggest single group claiming are those from Pakistan who've come ostensibly to meet their families or on holidays and have willfully, deliberately overstayed. But of course, it's been the events outside the Bell Hotel in Epping and at least another 30 sites around the country that have been very dominant over the course of the last week or two. All of that linked directly to the arrests of those that have come across the Channel who are alleged to have committed sexual offences. So there is a huge sense of anger out there. So is it time to leave the ECHR? And look, you know my opinion. I don't think we can do this. I don't think we can stop the boats unless we start deporting. I don't believe we can do that all the while. We're part of the ECHR and its convention is written into British law by the Human Rights Act of 1998. I will admit there are difficulties in that Tony Blair wrote it into the agreement, the peace agreement in Northern Ireland. He wrote it into the devolution agreements. There would be certainly for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland a fair bit of work to be done. I still believe it's the right thing to do. Some will say, why would you leave this? It was set up in the wake of World War II to prevent things like the Holocaust from ever happening again. I wouldn't for a moment doubt that it was so well-intentioned back in the late 1940s. I now just think it's totally outdated in every single way. Well, I'm joined by Joshua Rosenberg, legal commentator and solicitor. Joshua, the argument that I hear over and over is that British political figures, British lawyers and KCs were involved in the construction of this and therefore we should honour it for all time. But am I not right in saying that because of judicial activism, because of modern-day interpretations, that it's really become something rather different than was first intended.
It's a living instrument, that's the phrase that's used, and certainly it has developed over the past 75 years, as any statute is developed, as the common law develops. There are originalists. We remember Antonin Scalia in the US Supreme Court, who seemed to think, certainly in his later years, that we should go back to what the Founding Fathers intended and not move on from that. But in most areas of law, as the law develops, as society develops, an agreement is developed. Now, I'm not saying I think that the court has necessarily got it right. I supported the minority British judge last year in the case involving climate change, a case brought by Swiss women. And so possibly the court went too far there. Very interesting to see what was said in May by a group of European leaders from 9 states in the Council of Europe who thought that the court had gone too far on Article 8 compared with the original intentions behind the convention, shifting the balance and making it difficult. This is the right to respect for family life. So there is certainly debate, room for debate as to how the convention is interpreted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to leave it.
Well, you say that, but isn't it funny because, you know, we've got Denmark now, who have a zero refugee policy. We have Greece that are now physically turning back the boats when they come to within 12 miles of a Greek island. They seem to be able to do it. We don't seem to be able to do it. Is that because of our own judiciary who choose? Is it because they choose to interpret the convention put into British law in this way? Is this as much a problem of the British judiciary as it is the ECHR?
No, they don't choose to interpret. They were told by Parliament to interpret it in that way when the Human Rights Act was passed in 1998 and came into effect almost 25 years ago. As you say, that is what they are required to do. That was what Dominic Raab, the former Justice Secretary, called it, and that would change the obligation on the judges, and you might reasonably expect the judges to change the way they handle the convention if Parliament were to repeal the Human Rights Act. But you don't need to pull out of the Human Rights Convention just to repeal the Human Rights Act.
OK, and if we leave, which I personally think we have to do that, and I think we have to repeal the Human Rights Act and perhaps get back to some more basic common law principles, does that make us a pariah state?
It makes the UK an isolationist state. The proposal would be that we would not just leave the Human Rights Convention, we would have to leave the Council of Europe, the 46-member body across Europe that administers it, because you can't join the Council of Europe unless you accept the Human Rights Convention, so sooner or later the UK would have to leave the Council of Europe. You're suggesting also that the UK should pull out of various other international agreements, Refugee Convention and so on. So it would put the UK in a different position from the other states which are working together, working within to try to reform the convention.
Yeah, it'd put us in the position of Australia, America and many other countries around the world, all of whom we would regard as civilised countries.
Perfectly true. The question is what's in the UK's best interests?
Yep, and that's the political debate. Joshua, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm joined in the studio by Sir Ranald Jaya-Warner, former Conservative MP and Minister, and Joe Phillips, journalist and former Press Secretary to Paddy Ashdown. Strong point that was made by Joshua, who's always very good and very balanced, and I wanted to have a rational debate on this, not an emotional debate on this. But his point was very strong, wasn't it? That, you know, you put forward all sorts of bits of legislation in the last Parliament. You know, you had your own illegal immigration legislation, you had Rwanda, you had your attempt, or at least proposed attempt, to go back to sort of a 1689 Bill of Rights. Why did none of it actually happen or have any effect?
Well, so the Bill of Rights that was proposed was, as has been said, it was the replacement to the Human Rights Act. And let's be just very straightforward and honest. It was proposed in the 2019 manifesto. In between then and now, we did have a big pandemic to deal with.
Oh, dear.
No, hang on. You wanted a rational debate.
Oh, dear.
So hang on. You wanted a rational debate. Let me explain. So we had that to deal with. Yes, then we had some, work to do on Brexit, so we delivered the Brexit exit in 2020, we then delivered the trade deal in 2021, so those things took priority. But I think what's also been said by Joshua there is, and you said it also, it's actually the consequence of judicial activism in the UK.
Yeah,
that's the big thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why replacing the Human Rights Act with either a British Bill of Rights or, frankly, going back to what we had before 1998, which was case law, is no bad thing.
Which is common law.
Common law, exactly.
Yeah.
Because human rights were not invented in 1998.
I would point out, Ranald, you didn't have to lock us down again and again.
I accept that, and I think many people would do things differently. Let's be very just straightforward and honest.
Yeah.
Many people would do things differently. I had some personal problems that I said, if it crossed this line, I certainly then, at that point, couldn't support it. Thankfully, we didn't cross those lines. It was on things like mandatory vaccination and so on. They were threatened, never happened, but that was my red line, and I think everyone had their own red lines that, in their own minds. But look, well, we're not here to talk about COVID. We can talk about that another time. But I think the point is, human rights were not invented in 1998. The big baddie here is the Human Rights Act. That's the thing that's allowed activist judges to have their way and shape law without any democratic accountability. And the time has come for that to change.
Joe, whatever we think, I don't think anybody really would resile from the thoughts and sentiments of the post-1945 world, sort of the ECHR, the Council of Europe. It was all there as rather like an early warning system.
Yeah.
And we all understand that. But do you understand why the public are currently so infuriated?
Well, I think
that deporting anybody has become so difficult.
Yes, I do understand why the public are frustrated and annoyed and angry. And absolutely, you know, if you look at the context of when that was formed after the First and then the Second World War, by people who had seen and lived through it and had seen what we can do as human beings to each other. So, you know, the intentions were good, but I think, you know, Joshua made a really good point. It's a living instrument. And I don't think we should leave it, but we should work to reform it. And I think, you know, you mentioned Denmark. Well, you know, Denmark is part of it, but they are ploughing their own furrow. The whole issue of migration and deportation or detention or whatever, it's not particular to the UK.
The trouble with reforming it, Joe, it's a bit like the argument, we'll reform the common agricultural policy. We'll reform the common fisheries policy. We kind of heard that for almost half a century, and in the end, the British public said, you know what, we're bored with that argument, let's just leave. The problem is this. The crisis in Britain now is immediate. There is a genuine danger of a breakdown of law and order in this country over this issue. And if we try and reform something that's going to take us 5 or 10 years, it doesn't do much, does it?
Well, it doesn't, but, you know, let's be grown up about it. You said you wanted a grown-up debate, and whilst the public, you know, are ready for click and collect and I want it delivered to my door tomorrow, and they have no patience with politicians, they don't understand how long things take and why they take a long time. And if, you know, we were told we'd got an oven-ready deal for Brexit, we hadn't even plucked the chicken, had we? So, you know, actually, what happened on reform? People voted to leave because they didn't have the patience. And what we've ended up with is an absolute muddle and caused an awful lot of distress and cost to many, many businesses and many people. I think there are ways to look at it. You can look at a reform. I mean, it is one of the few things, possibly the only thing, that Kemi Badenoch has done that has been quite sensible, which is to have a commission to look at it. And I think it is worthy of discussion. But don't forget, Nigel, it protects us as well. It protects British citizens.
Does the country of Magna Carta need protecting from itself?
I think it protects our rights and our, you know,
What, a bunch of people in Strasbourg who aren't even judges? I mean, come on.
Well, I can see it being used to protect Christians and Jews in this country against a government like this government.
So you support staying in?
Well, no, I don't think we should be afraid of leaving, but I think we need to look at it very carefully. As I say, I think the big baddie is the Human Rights Act and other legislation like the Constitutional Reform Act and so on that gave judges so much more power. But I'm open to leaving if there is no other way. But David Blunkett said we should just disapply.
No. Listen,
those are things we can do right now.
When Blunkett was Home Secretary, illegal immigrants were deported, end of.
It can be done.
And that is what the public are demanding right now.
And it can be done under the ECHR.
But what the public are demanding and have been demanding, they have been lied to over years and years and
again
years.
And again.
Over, with different political parties, but I'm afraid to say, Ranald, mainly your party, because you were there for longer. And we saw what happened. I mean, Tony Blair stopped the right for migrants to work if they were here for more than 6 months. So that put a whole load of people in limbo. Boris Johnson then lowered the threshold of income so that more legal migrants could come here to take the jobs that previously European citizens had done, and a lot of those were coming from further away, bringing their families.
Two issues here.
Well, it isn't. It isn't.
No, it is. We're talking about illegal migration.
Yeah,
not being able to be stopped by the ECHR.
Yes, but the whole point is that people see or perceive things are changing in my town. That's perception.
But you're conflating two issues.
Yes,
though.
I know.
Well, the perception actually on legal and illegal migration is that repeated promises have been made again and again and again, and the public have been failed. We will leave that at that point. We've had a mature discussion, I think, around the ECHR. My view hasn't shifted. I think actually even more important than leaving the ECHR is actually getting the ECHR out of British law by repealing the Human Rights Act. I've come to realise over months it's that, above all, that British judges rely upon. Now, earlier, a government spokesman said 400 hotels were opened under the previous administration. We want to get the backlog down, asylum costs down. We are focused on tightening the ECHR's Article 8. Anyone proposing to leave the ECHR is not serious. We won't return to chaos like we've seen under the previous government. Well, they said leaving the EU wasn't a serious proposal, but it did happen. In a moment, 6.5 million on jobless benefits. Some of it, of course, is the catastrophic effect of the last Reeves budget, but also it's the unending rise of those claiming disability benefit. Surely we can't afford to go on like this.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I asked you, is it now time to leave the ECHR? Ronnie says, how about locking up the migrant smugglers for 10 years? How many would take the chance? Ronnie, you're wrong. You could lock them up for 100 years. They would go on doing it. You could bring back the death penalty. They would go on doing it. Why? Because in a single busy week, a smuggling gang can make millions and millions of euros. It's the same as the argument on drugs in many, many ways. It doesn't matter what the penalties are. If the rewards are that great, they'll go on doing it. I really do believe that very strongly. And he says, it is truly incredible that the small boats represent a minority of asylum claims. The problem is far worse than I even thought. Well, the biggest single group last year claiming refugee status, asylum, in the United Kingdom were from Pakistan. And that is a very common pattern. They come from Pakistan to see their auntie, don't go home, they're overstayers, then they find up some excuse to claim asylum. And unbelievably, even though the images of the boats are so dramatic, they only make up 40% of asylum claims. So you're quite right, the problem is much deeper and wider than just the boats. And finally, Philip says, it's all very well leaving the ECHR, but how do you stop domestic judicial activism? The answer to that is to take away the tools that they've been using. And that's why everything the Tory party did in the last government was meaningless, because they never took away the means. They might have had the right ideas, but they never actually had the will to take those powers away. Now let's talk about something that is really also very, very serious. There are now 6.5 million people, 6.5 million people on jobless benefits. Now, last November, Liz Kendall, who is the Work and Pension Secretary, said this.
We will provide those opportunities and young people will have a responsibility to take them up. And you know what? I think they will. Young people are desperate to work. They're desperate to get skills. We'll fulfil our side of the bargain to make that happen.
Well, I heard Liz Kendall say that last November. I agree with absolutely every word she said there. I agree with the sentiments that she expressed. But what is the reality? Well, we've hit the record 6.5 million. Unbelievably, those on out-of-work benefits that are made up of incapacity benefits, unemployment support and universal credit, those numbers are up by 80% since 2018. And if we look at disability benefit, the number of under 25s claiming sickness benefits has jumped by 52% since 2020. The whole thing, Joe, is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And actually, these young individuals that are being put on disability benefits...
It's such a waste, Nigel.
...are being told they're victims.
Yeah.
They're being told to think like victims. It's bad for them. It's bad for us.
Yeah, and it's completely unsustainable. For, you know, there are fewer people working to keep more and more people...
But how have we got here?
Well, we've got here partly because of COVID, I think.
Yeah.
I think also we've got into this thing, and what COVID did, of course, it meant that everybody could claim stuff by doing it online or on the phone. Now, when the government brought in its ill-thought-through welfare reforms, what they should have done is said, right, what we're going to do, first of all, you've got to have face-to-face appointments. You start doing that, that's a reform.
But COVID took that away.
But COVID took it away.
Or lockdown, rather, took that away.
Yeah, lockdown did. But, you know, nothing replaced it, so we just carried on, we muddled through and went, oh, COVID. You know, just like we do on so many things. Unfortunately, the government then caved in because they've got a bunch of newly elected, fairly inexperienced MPs who were terrified at the very real concerns of their constituents, who were perhaps threatened with losing their personal independence allowances and things like that. But they didn't have the gumption to say, no, we need to reform it. But the reality is that this is not just about benefits, Nigel. It's about access to work. Young people, summer holidays, always used to be able to get jobs, particularly in sort of seaside towns and places like that. And those figures that you've said, so you can't get...
So 89,000 people have lost jobs in the hospitality sector. Many people warned that the national insurance changes for employers. And what she did very cruelly, you talk about young people, she lowered the threshold at which the employer starts to pay NIC to £5,000 a year. They're the people you're talking about.
Yes. So if you're 16, 17 and you can't get a job during the summer and then another year goes by and you can't get a job over the Christmas holidays and all of that stuff, you are losing that valuable experience. And I'm sure many people watching will have all had, we've all just been talking about our various holiday jobs. Let's not go into Ranel's. But, you know, we all had those holiday jobs. It teaches you how to engage with people and you learn stuff. But it makes you more unemployable. And we know that if you're unemployed, the chances of getting employed. But I have to say, there are employers and recruitment agencies who make it so difficult. Once upon a time, you could walk into a shop or a restaurant or something and say, I'm looking for a job. You can't do that. They'll say, no, you've got to go online. It goes through some ghastly chatbot thing. So you are immediately repelled. So people get depressed. And instead of going, oh, this is rubbish, you know, they are written off and written off, and then it goes to spiral.
And as you were saying, Ranel, in the break, you know, sometimes, I mean, this has been a problem generation after generation. There is no... I'm not going to knock you again over lockdowns, but it did make it worse. I've just got one little positive idea. You could, during lockdown, on a 10-minute consultation with your family GP online, say, I'm a bit depressed, doc, and get signed off on disability. Shouldn't we reassess all those claims?
Absolutely. And look, the real sadness here is there are people who genuinely need support that we would all, whatever party, be willing to provide them because they have genuine disabilities.
Good society caring is weakest and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. And as a result of this, the welfare bill is becoming so unaffordable that they are going to suffer too. That's the greatest shame of all of this, because this bill is not sustainable and it's going to come to a point where we cannot afford to do anything anymore.
One of your former colleagues, Nicholas Soames, one of Churchill's grandsons, said to me once, he said, benefits are like this. You see a big Alsatian, you've got a bone. You don't have to give it to the Alsatian, but if you do, try and get it back. And, you know, Joe touched on this earlier. Actually, any reform of this leads to parliamentary rebellion. But we can't continue, can we?
No, it's totally unaffordable.
And you've got to reform.
The government's just not going to be able to do what it wants to do and all sorts of other things if it doesn't get this right, including defence. You know, are we seriously saying we're not going to defend this country and we can't afford to do that because we're paying benefits to people who do?
Well, and the other thing is that, you know, if you have got a walloping great majority, everybody knows, you know, the first rule of politics, do the hard stuff quickly and at the beginning. So if you're going to cut the triple lock, well, you know...
But isn't it bizarre, Joe, you know, and you've been following all this for quite some time, isn't it bizarre? I didn't mean that nastily, but isn't it bizarre that a government with such a big majority is unable to do almost anything with its own parliamentary party?
And these are people who perhaps are thinking that they've only got one term, so they'd rather be able to look their former constituents in the face. But the reality is, if you go in and say, we're reforming, you lay out what your reforms are first, and then that would take away. I mean, it is utterly ludicrous.
If they'd wanted to do meaningful reform, the Conservatives were willing to support it. The truth is that even the reforms they were bringing forward weren't systemic enough, and that's the problem here, that not only did their backbenchers not allow the Labour Party to do what they proposed, but what was being proposed simply wasn't enough.
No, it's unaffordable, it's unsustainable, but it's also condemning far too many young people into victim status. You're a victim, so you behave like a victim, and you go on this benefit, and you stay at home, and you don't live a life at all. And think of all the talent as a country we're wasting doing this. In a moment, we're going to talk about the Islamophobia laws that may be coming in under Labour, proposed by Angela Rayner, been suggested actually today by a leading academic it could lead to social unrest. We'll also talk about public behaviour on the London Underground and more generally on transport in this country.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, there's plenty of sunny spells across Europe, but also some widespread thunderstorms developing. So across much of Madeira and the Canary Islands, a few showers here and breezy. Across Spain, fine with plenty of sunshine. But here are those thunderstorms with the risk of hail and lightning. Across Greece, much of the country seeing plenty of sunshine here. And as we go through the week, there'll still be some showers around, but also plenty of sunshine still, and temperatures up to 33.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. This is your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Most places are going to have a largely dry night, with today's showers largely dying out. However, there is a weather system out in the Atlantic that's heading our way, and it's going to bring a spell of pretty heavy and perhaps even thundery rain for many places as we go through tomorrow. Before that though, like I said, a largely dry night across many spots, just a few showers, particularly towards the north and west. Under the dry, clearer weather, things may turn a little fresh for some of us. That being said, most towns and cities holding up in double digits. Just a few rural spots could just about fall into single figures. And then it's a largely fine start to the day for many places. Across much of Scotland, there will be a good deal of sunshine early on, just a few showery bursts here or there, particularly around some central areas. There could be a couple of showers and they could be a little bit on the heavy side. A different story for Northern Ireland though. That weather system I highlighted here, it is going to be bringing a pretty wet start to the day, and there could be some gusty winds, maybe even some rumbles of thunder mixed in with it as well. Similar across parts of Western Wales, southwest England, an unsettled start here. Elsewhere across much of England though, it's a fine picture through much of the morning, but that whole frontal system is going to march its way eastwards across the whole of the country. So most of us will see a spell of heavy rain, and there could be some thunder, some gusty winds mixed in. The further east you are, the later it's going to arrive. With the slightly more unsettled weather, temperatures are going to be down a couple of degrees and feeling a little bit fresher as well compared to today. Then into Thursday, and it's a bit of a westy split. Eastern parts having a lot of fine weather still. Further west, a greater chance of some frequent showers, and these could be heavy, perhaps even thundery, and a few of those showers will push their way towards the east as well. Another showery day likely on Friday and on Saturday, but that does bring the potential for some heavier rain, perhaps in the southwest.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's Newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
So much talk under this Labour government, especially led by the property tycoon, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, about whether there should be a specific definition of Islamophobia backed up by law. And the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims decided Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Needless to say, it's raising debate. We've even had a prominent Muslim spokesman today who has said, you know, if you do this, you stifle debate. Figaz Mughal said, if you do this, you stifle debate about grooming gang scandals, the role of the hijab, niqab and Sharia courts. What on earth are they thinking, Ranald?
Yeah, I mean, look,
what on earth are they thinking?
This is clearly... look, this is actually a difficult issue. Look, no one's advocating Islamophobia in itself.
No.
No one would want the persecution of Christians or Jews.
Yeah.
So we should be really clear about that. But the fact that the is trying to create, in effect, a two-tier system here that has protections for one religion over everyone else. That is not acceptable.
Well, hang on. That all-party parliamentary group report came out in 2018 when your lot were in government.
And it's an all-party parliamentary group. We didn't legislate.
But, Joe, the difference is they never said they put it into law.
No, but the report came out back then.
Yes, fair point.
Yeah.
But it's about what a government does.
Yes.
And this government is creating a two-tier system.
No, they're not creating. They're considering. They're looking at it. They are not creating it yet.
If you believed in a society, Joe, if you had a meritocratic mindset and you believed in a fair society, surely you would treat everybody equally, regardless of what particular faith they chose to practice or what they wanted to do in the bedroom or anything else.
I mean, you know, to think about another law is utterly ridiculous because apart from anything else, they're conflating race and religion. And that is ignorant, to say the very least.
Do you know what? They won't do this, will they?
No, it's stupid.
They won't do this.
Well, I really hope they don't.
But also, we've got laws that exist in this country. We have the Equality Act.
Yes.
We also have Public Order and Public Offences Acts. We have plenty of legislation that can be used. And we absolutely have enshrined protection of religion, whatever religion that should be. And what is so muddled about the idea of this is it's not about Islam. It's about, they wear different clothes, they have got, you know, different religion. But it's not actually anything. And this is where governments, they seem to be absolutely addicted to it. I know, let's bring in a new law, and then we'll forget about it. And it doesn't help. And we, you know,
but it's also about dividing us all up, Joe.
It's about
you're in
dividing
this
us,
category, you're in that category, you're in the other.
So you can
and
never have a conversation with your Muslim colleague at work and ask a question without for fear of thinking that you're going to be taken to the cleaners.
Now, moving on, the What the Farage moment is that Transport for London are going to introduce a new travel time campaign saying if you're going to play music, then please, please, please put on headphones. But it takes me back to a piece that I read whilst I was away. Jenny Russell has been a Times commentator for many, many years, and she wrote this. It starts off discomforted. That's because she'd walked down a street in London after dinner and felt threatened. Discomforted, I took the tube, where my half-full carriage was dominated by a man shouting into his phone. Disturbed by that, I eventually made the mistake of looking at him. What was I looking at? Could I F off, he shouted. I said I was surprised he was so loud. Incensed, he leapt up, crossed the carriage, leant over me to swear some more, spat in my face before jumping off the train. Nobody in the carriage reacted. Nobody asked how I was. No one offered me a tissue. The most depressing element of the evening was the indifference of the other passengers. My lifetime experience has been that in public places, the majority look out for one another. I'd assumed most of those around me shared the codes that I was brought up with. At very least, not to disturb, intimidate, or assault others. Not here. I looked around and realised I was again the only woman in sight. And Joe, this happened in London. And I don't know the proportion of people living on that tube who've been brought up under different codes to Jenny Russell. But we're literally, through what we've done, through mass importation of people from foreign cultures.
The bloke got off, so they were not threatened. They weren't going to be threatened by him if they had gone over kindly and said, "Are you all right?" You know, so...
Well, the fact that the bloke had got off and still nobody's reassured her is even more disturbing.
That makes it even worse. You know, I can quite understand why people are reluctant, they're frightened.
Is London, are parts of London becoming like the third world?
I don't know. I don't live in London. I hate London with a passion, and I always have done, and I hated it when I lived here.
It's good to have a knowledgeable person on commentate. No, fair enough.
No, but I mean, you know, well, just to give you an example, Nigel, as you know, I mean, I worked and lived in the Middle East for an awfully long time.
I know.
Very dangerous countries. I was never safer than when I was in Syria, and 3 days after I came home, I was stabbed in the neck outside Highbury tube station. So, you know, you can...
the problem's not brand new.
No, it's not brand new.
But there's a general... I mean...
But there's a general thing about bad behaviour, and this is... What happened to Jenny is shocking and appalling.
It's societal breakdown, Randall.
Yeah, the social fabric of this country is really being stretched to the nth degree now. And, you know, whether it's, as you put it earlier, you know, separating everyone into little groups so that we don't feel that we are one anymore, whether it's people not feeling that the law will be on their side if they intervene. I mean, I've had, this is a terrible incident that she's suffered. I've taken someone on previously for vaping on the tube. You might disagree with me on the matter of policy, but I could smoke on the tube. But I took someone on, and thankfully they didn't physically challenge me, but yes, I got abuse as well. And that's not acceptable. First of all, the person should be following the rules. Second, actually people shouldn't feel threatened.
Do you accept, Ranald, that mass migration into cities like London, where a minority now have grown up with the codes of Jenny Russell, has changed our country?
I think a lack of integration has led to this. So I actually don't think it's necessarily migration in itself, but I think the lack of integration, the acceptance that people should just live different lives, different cultures, there should be no assimilation. That's the problem.
Well, I don't think it's got anything to do with migration. I think it's got an awful lot to do with how absolutely rude and selfish we've become. And, you know, you can see white families who are badly behaved, and if you ask them to turn the phone down, you get a mouthful of abuse.
No one's arguing.
You know,
that's also true. No one's arguing
but
that all British-born people are perfect.
And it's the it's the dine and dashes. It's the people who go out and think nothing of dining and dashing and leaving some poor struggling restaurateur.
Or not paying for the petrol or whatever.
not paying.
Right. Well, in a moment, economics. Front page of this week's Sunday Telegraph was suggesting, a senior economist was suggesting, that we could be in a fiscal doom loop leading to another IMF bailout 50 years on. Can it really be true? I'll be joined by Liam Halligan in just a moment.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You've got to Be really quite old to remember Dennis Healey in 1976 as Chancellor of the Exchequer going cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund to bail Britain out as we went through a sterling crisis and a borrowing crisis. Well, extraordinarily, this week the front page of a Sunday Telegraph was suggesting we could be going back into a situation like that. Liam Halligan, who was in that paper, and today a big column from Liam in the Daily Mail today. Liam, welcome to the programme. One thing today that really hit me from your article, you said the last time bond yields, namely what government has to pay to borrow money on 30-year bonds, was at this level, our debt to GDP ratio was 36%, and now it's 100. I mean, from reading your piece today, you really believe we're in deep trouble, don't you?
I do, Nigel, and you know me well enough that you'll believe me when I say it gives me no pleasure to say that we're deeply in trouble. And also, I think, to be fair and even-handed, it's worth saying that Labour had a really bad economic inheritance from the Tories. National debt was already approaching 100% of GDP when the Tories left office. Debt service costs were already very high. The tax burden, tax as a share of GDP, was already a 70-year high. But Rachel Reeves and Labour have made it much, much worse because they've jacked up borrowing, they've jacked up spending, not least in that October Halloween budget last year. They jacked up borrowing and spending again in April, and they're going to do the same this coming October, November, the next budget. And guess what? Financial markets, they don't care what the Bank of England's saying about interest rates. They're just mood music, what the Bank of England's doing, because the financial markets, the big insurance companies, the investment houses, the sovereign wealth funds that actually determine borrowing costs in the economy, they're saying we don't believe the Bank of England that inflation's under control. We don't believe the government that they're going to get spending under control. All we see is a bunch of mad left-wingers on the government's backbenches pushing Downing Street around, as we saw with those botched welfare reforms earlier this summer. That's why, Nigel, the 30-year gilt yield, it sounds like arcane. Basically, the long-term cost of government borrowing, it's the basis for every borrowing cost in the economy, whether it's your hire purchase agreement on your car or in the long term your mortgage. Certainly, it determines what the government pays, is now at its highest in over a quarter of a century. Yes, Blair came in on a big majority with a high gilt yield, but he had government debt of just 36% of GDP. When you're paying a massive gilt yield on 100% of GDP, your debt service costs go through the roof. That's why, Nigel, we're now paying more on debt interest. The government's paying more on debt interest than we spend on schools. Twice what we spend on education. We talk about a 50 billion black hole. We may have to all pay 50 billion quid's worth more of taxes this October. Guess what? That's just half our debt service bill. Yeah, just half.
I know. So, Liam, you know, we're in this mess, but Rachel Reeves has another budget in the autumn. Perhaps she can turn this round.
Well, if she comes to the House and doesn't address what's happening on financial markets, if she just ignores it, if she just, you know, stays in line with the sort of youthful advisors around her who just say, oh, don't worry, bond yields are going up across the country, unless she acknowledges that government borrowing costs now in the UK are well beyond where they are in Greece, Spain, Italy. Nice places to go on holiday, not necessarily paragons of virtue when it comes to budgetary discipline, with respect to my Greek, Spanish and Italian friends. Bond yields are now way above where they were at the height of the mini budget crisis under Liz Truss. You know, do you hear that from other broadcasters? No, you don't.
I know. Why? Why is it not being discussed?
Because I think that there was a lot of ideological aversion to what Liz Truss was trying to do from our mainstream media, but also because Liz Truss made mistakes. You know, I've got some respect for Liz Truss, as you know. But it was wrong to not tell the OBR about your budget. It was not wrong to not give the Bank of England the details of your budget. I understand why she was frustrated at those organisations, but you can't just ride roughshod over the institutions in real time. Reform them if you want, but don't just dismiss them. Yeah. And I think markets were really spooked by that. But guess what? They're a lot more spooked now by Labour.
Yeah. But she didn't promise to cut spending, did she?
No, she didn't promise to cut spending, and she said that she would support energy bills in the aftermath of the war in Ukraine. In the end, she didn't spend a lot of the money that she said she might spend on that. But the main point is this. Nothing she was doing was particularly radical. She wanted to bring down the top rate of tax to where it was under Brown and Blair. She wanted to not cut corporation tax. She wanted to keep corporation tax where it was. But look, the big picture here, Nigel, and it's a decision for the Tories and with respect your party as well, who is going to be the grown-up in the room here? Who is going to stand up for mathematical and financial reality? We are spending way, way, way beyond our means. The markets are now starting to call time on the UK economy in the way they're scrutinising no other major economy in the world. We face a 1976 style meltdown when we went cap in hand to the IMF. It's not just me that's saying that, Nigel. It's now very serious people. My Sunday Telegraph, the article in the Sunday Telegraph reflected an interview on my When the Facts Change Substack with a guy called Jajit Chadha, who's a Cambridge professor, one of the most respected economists in Britain, very much a sort of non-political guy, mild-mannered. And after that interview, you had two other former members of the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, saying exactly the same thing. And guess what, Nigel? My WhatsApp is full of serious economists saying the same thing.
Liam, you're a star. Thank you. I ran over time there with Liam, but what he said was fascinating. We're in a lot of mess, aren't we?
Yeah, and look, this is clearly really troubling for us all, because what happens for the government and the country at that top level affects all of our lives. And so we should all take a real interest in this. I mean, I do think it's important equally not to talk. I'm not here to defend the government, but it's important not to talk the country down equally. You know, back then, when we last went to the IMF, our currency, our exchange rate with the dollar had gone from 260 to 160, so huge shift. That's not happened recently.
Where we are now.
But you know, I think the amount of borrowing is really troubling.
Well, it is very worrying, and I don't think we've properly recovered from the 2008 crash, which has, you know, had impact all around the world. I mean, I know it's only tiny, but we are still one of the fastest growing economies in the G7. Yeah, but
well, we might be, Joe, but we've also got the highest inflation, so you've got to weigh all these things up.
But I think Ranald's right. There's a great danger that we talk ourselves, and I think, you know, to a certain extent, that's what Rachel Reeves did when she first was in office. We need to also be positive as well.
That speech from the things that can only get worse. Speech that we got from the Prime Minister is absolutely
so I think we must avoid the doom loop.
Well,
but it is rather worrying.
We shouldn't talk ourselves into negativity, but I tell you what, Liam Halligan, you know, it tries to be pretty and what he does and what he said there he meant. To my great panel, thank you very much. To you at home for watching and for listening, thank you. Coming up next, an outside broadcast from Somerset from Jacob Rees-Mogg on State of the Nation. First, though, the all-important weather.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening. This is your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Most places are going to have a largely dry night, with today's showers largely dying out. However, there is a weather system out in the Atlantic that's heading our way, and it's going to bring a spell of pretty heavy and perhaps even thundery rain for many places as we go through tomorrow. Before that, though, like I said, a largely dry night across many spots, just a few showers, particularly towards the north and west. Under the dry, clearer weather, things may turn a little fresh for some of us. That being said, most towns and cities holding up in double digits. Just a few rural spots could just about fall into single figures. And then it's a largely fine start to the day for many places. Across much of Scotland, there will be a good deal of sunshine early on. Just a few showery bursts here or there, particularly around some central areas. There could be a couple of showers, and they could be a little bit on the heavy side. A different story for Northern Ireland, though. That weather system I highlighted here, it is going to be bringing a pretty wet start to the day, and there could be some gusty winds, maybe even some rumbles of thunder mixed in with it as well. Similar across parts of Western Wales, southwest England, an unsettled start here. Elsewhere across much of England, though, it's a fine picture. through much of the morning, but that whole frontal system is going to march its way eastwards across the whole of the country. So most of us will see a spell of heavy rain, and there could be some thunder, some gusty winds mixed in. The further east you are, the later it's going to arrive. With the slightly more unsettled weather, temperatures are going to be down a couple of degrees and feeling a little bit fresher as well compared to today. Then into Thursday, and it's a bit of a westy split. Eastern parts having a lot of fine weather still. Further west, a greater chance of some frequent showers, and these could be heavy, perhaps even thundery, and a few of those showers will push their way towards the east as well. Another showery day likely on Friday and on Saturday, but that does bring the potential for some heavier rain, perhaps in the southwest.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.